The laptop screen came alive on its own, and I realized the man my daughter married had been rehearsing her disappearance. My chest did not tighten with panic. It steadied, because betrayal is clearer than love once it stops pretending. I closed the bedroom door without a sound, already knowing that whatever he had planned for my family, I would now finish on my own terms. If betrayal ever wore a familiar face in your life, subscribe now. These stories teach women what silence hides. By 68, a woman expects fewer surprises, not because life softens, but because pain has already shown its favorite tricks. I believed I had earned that quiet. My name is Maribel Sloan, widowed, retired, a mother who did not quit when it would have been easier to harden. I lived alone in Ashford Glen, a town that smelled of cut grass and old money pretending not to notice itself. My house sat at the end of a narrow street lined with maples, the porch boards worn smooth by decades of waiting. Mornings followed ritual, coffee brewed too strong, the paper folded the same way every time. I spoke aloud to my late husband Elliot while buttering toast, as if grief were a roommate who preferred courtesy to conversation. Elliot had been gone 6 years. Cancer does not rush, but it does not apologize either. When he died, I learned the difference between loneliness and solitude. Solitude is chosen. Loneliness arrives with assumptions. My daughter Lydia was 32 now, a nurse, capable, kind, raised with discipline and tenderness in equal measure. I paid her tuition after Elliot passed, sold my second car, refinanced quietly, stretched meals without complaint. Mothers do not announce sacrifice. We just adjust our posture and continue. When Lydia met Calder Rowe, she was exhausted, emotionally thin, the kind of tired that settles behind the eyes. Calder arrived like relief. He was not striking but intentional. His suits fit Ashford Glen too well. His hair was always precise. His voice carried authority without volume. He laughed easily, but never first, always after gauging the room. The first night I met him, he brought a bottle of wine I couldn't pronounce and asked about my arthritis with practiced concern. He listened without interrupting. He stacked plates before dessert. He used the word family early, often and deliberately. "He's perfect," Lydia said afterward, squeezing my arm with a brightness that felt rehearsed. "You don't have to worry about me anymore." Something in that sentence unsettled me. Not the words, the speed. Perfect people rarely need to be declared. They married 18 months later. I paid for the wedding quietly. The string quartet Lydia adored, the photographer, the flowers. I gave her my grandmother's ring, the one Elliot polished himself every anniversary, even when his hands shook. Calder thanked me publicly, held my hand, kissed my cheek, called me Mom. I noticed his eyes left my face the moment gratitude was spoken. The first red flag was almost polite. Calder insisted on handling the paperwork. "It's what I do," he said lightly. "Details stress Lydia." At the time, I admired him for it. The second was subtler. He corrected Lydia gently, in public, as though guiding a child through a difficult sentence. "She exaggerates sometimes." He laughed once when Lydia mentioned being tired. "You know how emotional she gets." People smiled. Lydia smiled too. I did not. I told myself I was projecting, that I had lost a good man and mistrusted confident ones now, that love looks different from the outside. Loneliness is generous with excuses. It was a bright Sunday, folding tables, coffee brewed weak, lemon bars dusted with sugar that clung to fingertips. Calder was holding court. "And Maribel worries," he said, patting my hand as if I were fragile china. "She always has." Laughter followed, warm and careless. I smiled because humiliation often disguises itself as humor, and calling it out makes you appear ungrateful. I had spent a lifetime being agreeable. That should have been my first warning, but I was trained to smooth, not sharpen. Lydia turned 32. I baked her favorite cake myself, even though my hands ached by the end. Calder arrived 40 minutes late. She gets anxious, he explained to the table, arm draped over her shoulders. I try to keep her calm. Lydia stared at her plate. The joke landed. The laughter followed. That should have been my second warning. But loyalty teaches us to mistake silence for peace. I asked to watch my granddaughter Maeve one Saturday. Calder answered instead of Lydia. We already made plans, he said pleasantly. Lydia forgot to tell you. Later, when I asked Lydia, confusion crossed her face briefly, then apology replaced it. I must have forgotten, she said softly. I noticed how often she forgot things now. That should have been my third warning, but mothers are conditioned to trust their children's happiness, even when it looks borrowed. I was helping Lydia fold laundry when her phone buzzed inside her purse. The screen lit up. Reminders stacked neatly under Calder's name. Take medication. Do not argue. Rest now. He helps me stay organized, Lydia said too quickly. I believed her. Or perhaps I chose not to press. Avoidance is its own form of betrayal. At a family gathering, Calder mentioned my home casually. You could sell eventually, he said. Downsize. Cruises are lovely for widows. It was said kindly, casually, as if already discussed. Lydia laughed too fast. I laughed slower. That should have been my final warning. But loyalty, once practiced long enough, feels like virtue even when it becomes danger. The call came on a Wednesday afternoon. Unknown number. Maeve's voice broke through sobs. Grandma, please come. Mom is on the floor. Time folded inward. Their house smelled wrong, too clean, metallic beneath detergent. Lydia lay pale against the rug, eyes fluttering. Paramedics moved with professional calm. Calder was nowhere to be found. In the bedroom, the laptop glowed. A video played, Calder's voice, low, controlled, coaching Lydia, correcting her memory, timing her responses, instructing her how to sound reasonable. Documents lay open beside it. Power of attorney drafts, insurance riders, a trust document, my name misspelled. Then I saw the folder. Departure. Inside was a one-way cruise ticket. My name, my forged signature. I sat on the edge of the bed and felt something inside me go very still. This was not neglect. This was design. And in that stillness, I understood something Calder had not calculated. I was not emotional. I was patient. I didn't shut the laptop immediately. I should have. Any sane woman would have slammed it shut the way you close a door on a snake. But my hands stayed calm and my eyes stayed open, because I have learned something in 68 years. When the truth finally shows itself, you don't blink first. The video ended and restarted on its own. Calder's voice returned like a needle finding the same bruise. Say it again, he instructed Lydia, my Lydia, like a director rehearsing an actress. With less emotion. You can cry later. My daughter's face on the screen looked dim, as though the light in her had been negotiated down. She sat at the kitchen table. Our old oak table I had once helped her sand and oil when she moved in, hands folded the way sick people fold their hands because there is nowhere else to put the fear. I'm just tired, she said on the recording. Calder leaned in, almost tender. Not tired, confused. You've been confused lately. That's the word. Confused. The word that makes a woman sound unreliable. The word that makes her memory negotiable. I pulled a breath through my nose. The room smelled like expensive cologne and lemon cleaner. A scent meant to imply control. On the bed, beside the laptop, was a folder. Pale gray. Neat label. Departure. Inside, the cruise ticket sat like an invitation to vanish. One way. My name. A signature that looked like mine if you'd only seen it once in passing. I traced the ink without touching it, like reading a bruise on someone else's skin. Then the strangest thing happened. My fear didn't increase. It simplified. It condensed into something cold and usable. I heard movement in the hallway and turned. A woman stood at the doorway, Not Lydia's friend, not family. Someone older, with her gray hair rolled into a tight twist, eyes sharp as sewing needles. Mrs. Halden, the neighbor. She held a dish towel like it was a weapon. "I heard your car," she said, "and I saw the ambulance. I knew it was trouble. This house has had trouble in it for months." Her words were not gossip. They were a confession of observation. I asked, quietly, "Where is he?" She didn't say Calder's name. She didn't need to. Gone. He left in his sedan 15 minutes before you arrived, like he knew the timing. My jaw tightened. Mrs. Halden glanced at the laptop, then looked away quickly, as if even seeing evil required permission. "He tried to get me to witness something," she added. "What kind of something?" My voice sounded steady. That steadiness shocked me a little. Mrs. Halden's mouth pinched. Signatures, papers, notary talk. He came over all friendly, calling me ma'am, offering to fix my porch light. Then he asked if I'd come over and confirm Lydia signed a document in front of me. I stared at her. She continued. I told him I wasn't comfortable. He smiled like I'd complimented him. Then he said, "Of course, I understand. We just want everything proper. Before Maribel goes on her trip." My stomach turned, not with nausea, but with the sharp recognition of a plan that had been rehearsed too long. "And Lydia?" I asked. Mrs. Halden swallowed. "Sometimes I see her through the window late at night. She stands at the sink staring at nothing, like she's waiting for permission to breathe." Then she looked at me, and her eyes softened in a way only older women can soften, women who've watched too much and regretted their silence. "I should have knocked," she whispered. "I should have asked her if she was okay." I nodded once, because guilt is useless unless it becomes action. "Do you still have those papers?" I asked. Her brows lifted. "Papers? The ones he tried to make you witness?" She shook her head. "No, but I can tell you something else." She leaned closer, voice dropping. "He has visitors, men. Not often, but sometimes. Late. They don't park in the driveway, they park down the street like thieves." My skin went cold again, not from fear, but from the widening of the situation. Calder wasn't acting alone. That was the first true twist of the day, and it landed quietly in my chest like a stone. I looked back at the laptop. And this wasn't just a controlling husband. This was a coordinated operation wearing a wedding ring. At the hospital, fluorescent lighting makes everyone look guilty or dying. There is no flattering truth under those bulbs. Lydia lay in a bed behind a thin curtain. Maeve sat in a plastic chair, knees pulled up, face blotched from crying. When she saw me, she launched herself into my arms like a small animal that had finally found cover. "Grandma," she said, and that single word was so raw I felt it scrape my heart. I held her tight. Her hair smelled like strawberry shampoo and fear. A nurse approached, young, brisk, kind in the way busy people are kind. "You family?" "I'm her mother," I said. The nurse nodded and lowered her voice. "Your daughter was brought in with low blood pressure and symptoms consistent with medication interaction. We stabilized her. She's resting. She asked for her child, not her husband." That last part was said carefully, as if the nurse was stepping around a stain. "Has anyone contacted him?" I asked. The nurse's lips pressed thin. "A number was provided. It went to voicemail." Of course it did. The doctor arrived, Dr. Soren Weller, a man in his early 50s with the calm face of someone who has seen tragedy in every variety. He spoke plainly. "Your daughter has sedatives in her system that don't align with the prescription on her chart." I kept my voice low. "What does that mean?" "It means someone's adjusting her dosage without proper oversight." I did not react outwardly, but inside, every memory rearranged itself. The reminders on Lydia's phone: take medication, rest now, do not argue. I asked Dr. Weller, "Is she in danger?" He held my gaze. "Not if we correct the medication and remove the source of the interference." Remove the source. A neat phrase. A polite way of saying, get her away from the person poisoning her life. Lydia stirred sometime later. Her eyes opened slow. She looked at me and her face changed, the way a child's face changes when she wakes from a nightmare and sees someone safe. Mom? Her voice was small. I sat beside her and took her hand. Her fingers were cold. You scared me, I said gently, though the words were inadequate for the panic I'd swallowed. She looked away, shame rising in her cheeks like heat. I'm fine, she tried. I didn't let her. No, I said softly. You're not, and I'm done pretending your life is normal because you want it to look normal. Tears pooled in her eyes immediately. That quickness told me she'd been holding them back for a long time. I didn't want you to hate him, she whispered. I felt something sharp in my throat. Sweetheart, I don't hate him. That was a lie, but it was the right lie for that moment. I want you alive, I corrected, and free enough to breathe without permission. Her mouth trembled. Her hand tightened around mine. Then she said something that made the room tilt. He said you were trying to break us apart. My lips parted slightly. What? Lydia blinked, slow. He said you never liked him, that you were jealous of our family. The absurdity of it might have been funny if it wasn't so cruel. Jealous, at 68, of my own daughter's marriage. Calder didn't just control Lydia, he edited reality. And he had been doing it so long, Lydia wasn't sure where her own thoughts ended and his began. Maeve shifted in the chair, watching us like she was watching weather. Maeve, I said gently, did you call me from a strange number because yours wasn't working? Maeve's face tightened. He took Mom's phone, she whispered. He takes it when she's acting strange. Acting strange. Another phrase designed to turn a woman into a case file. I squeezed Lydia's hand. Did you sign anything recently? Lydia's eyes flickered away. That was my answer. I leaned in. Lydia, look at me. She forced herself to meet my gaze. He had taught her to look down. I could see it. Yes, she whispered. He said it was insurance things, medical things, in case something happens. He said you'd be proud of how responsible he was. My stomach went cold again. Do you remember what it was called? I asked. She shook her head, then winced as if the motion hurt. Then she said, barely audible, he recorded me signing it. I closed my eyes for 1 second. Calder wasn't just planning paperwork. He was building proof. Proof that Lydia agreed. Proof that I agreed. Proof that whatever happened next was proper. When you're young, revenge is loud. It's a slap, a scream, a scandal in the street. When you're older, revenge becomes something smarter. It becomes a quiet series of doors closing. I didn't confront Calder, not yet. I did what Elliot once taught me when the furnace broke in winter and we didn't have money for a repairman. You don't panic. You isolate the source. You build a solution. Then you turn the system back on without asking the problem for permission. First, I called my attorney. Avery Klein answered on the second ring, voice crisp. Maribel Sloan, it's been a while. It has, I said. I need you now, tonight. There was a pause, just long enough for her to sense the weight. Tell me the headline, she said. My daughter's husband is forging documents, I replied. And I think he's trying to remove me from my own life. Avery inhaled slowly. Where are you? At St. Bartholomew's. I'll meet you in the lobby in 30 minutes, she said. Bring whatever you have, and Maribel, do not warn him. I won't, I said, because warning a man like Calder is like warning a snake you're about to step on it. It only changes the speed of the bite. Second, I called someone I didn't love calling. A retired investigator named Dorian Pike, a man Elliot once referred to as a polite bloodhound. Dorian answered with a voice like gravel. Sloan. Pike, I replied. I need your nose. Silence. Then, that bad? Yes, I said, and I need it quiet. He exhaled. Send me the address. I'll start with his money. Because money tells the truth faster than people do. Avery arrived in the lobby wearing a charcoal coat and the expression of a woman who didn't waste sympathy, only solutions. We sat in a corner near the vending machines where the air smelled like stale chips and disinfectant. I placed my phone on the table and slid it toward her. I photographed everything. Avery scrolled. Her face hardened with every swipe. Power of attorney drafts, trust documents, the cruise itinerary. Avery's mouth tightened. "He's not sloppy," she murmured. "That's the problem." "What do we do?" I asked. "We don't do one thing," she said. "We do several, quietly, in sequence, and we make sure your daughter is protected before he realizes he's being watched." I stared at her. "Can we freeze accounts?" "If your daughter signed documents giving him authority," Avery said carefully, "it complicates things. But complications aren't walls. They're puzzles." Avery tapped the screen. "This cruise ticket, he planned for you to leave the country." "To vanish," I corrected. She nodded once. "Or to die somewhere convenient." The words were spoken like weather, but they hit me like hail. "Your granddaughter's call saved your daughter," Avery added. "Now we make sure it saves you, too." Maeve sat quietly beside me, listening. She was too young to understand legal strategy, but she understood tone. Avery turned to Maeve, softening slightly. "You did the right thing calling your grandma, sweetheart." Maeve's eyes filled. I thought Mom was going to sleep forever. I wanted to cry then, not later. Then. But I didn't. Because I was beginning to understand what Calder depended on. Women crying in corners while he moved paperwork in daylight. Not this time. Avery leaned close to me and lowered her voice. "Maribel, I need you to tell me something important." "What?" "Do you still have your original wills and property documents?" "Yes," I said. "In my home safe." "Good," she said. "Tonight you're not going back to an empty house." "I'm not afraid," I said. Avery gave me a look that said she appreciated bravery but preferred caution. "I didn't ask if you were afraid," she replied. "I asked if you were going to be smart." That was Avery Klein. Sharp, efficient, and inconveniently correct. Calder called me at 11:18 p.m. His voice was smooth, concerned. A husband's concern, polished. "Maribel," he said. "How's Lydia? I just got your message. I'm headed home now." Home. He said it like he owned it, like Lydia was furniture. I answered softly, like a mother-in-law who still believed in manners. "She's resting," I said. "The doctor said it was exhaustion." A pause. Small, but present. Then, "Exhaustion," he repeated, as if memorizing the version of events. "Yes," I said. "You know how sensitive she is." I heard his breath shift. He liked that. He liked hearing his own phrase returned as truth. "Oh," he said gently, "you've always been protective, but Lydia needs calm, not suspicion." There it was. The attempt to put me back in the box he'd built for me, the suspicious older woman who imagines problems. I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "Of course," I said. "You're perfect, Calder. That's what Lydia always tells me." The line slid out sweetly, and on the other end, I heard it, his satisfaction, because men like Calder don't want love, they want agreement. Before we ended the call, he added something that tightened my spine. "I'm planning a surprise for you," he said, "something you've earned." The way he said earned sounded like he was counting down. I kept my voice warm. How thoughtful. He laughed softly. "Get some rest, Maribel." When the call ended, Avery looked at me. "What did he say?" "That he's planning a surprise," I replied, "and that I should rest." Avery's eyes narrowed. "He's moving sooner than we thought." Dorian Pike texted 10 minutes later. "Rose have 2 shell accounts. One connects to a notary service. Also, he's not alone." I stared at the message. Not alone. Mrs. Halden's visitors. Men parking down the street. The notary service. This wasn't just a husband with a cruel streak. This was a man running a system, and the system had decided my family was convenient. By Friday morning, the truth no longer felt abstract. It felt mapped. Dorian Pike spread the files across Avery Klein's conference table with the calm precision of a man who had learned never to dramatize evil. Evil loved drama. It thrived on confusion. What destroyed it was order. Calder Rowe, according to the documents, was not simply an abusive husband with a taste for control. He was a participant in something older, quieter, and far more efficient. A financial extraction network that preyed on women who were tired, isolated, or too polite to fight back. Widows, aging parents, professionals stretched thin by caregiving and guilt. He didn't marry Lydia by accident, Dorian said. He selected her. Lydia sat very still beside me. Her hospital bracelet had been removed, but the faint outline remained on her wrist, like a reminder of how close she had come to vanishing without leaving a mark. They start with care, Dorian continued. Medication reminders, organization, gentle corrections. Then they move into authority, medical first, financial second, emotional last. By the time the woman realizes something is wrong, the paperwork already says she agreed. Avery adjusted her glasses. And Maribel? Dorian looked at me directly. You were the endgame. I did not flinch. Fear had already spent itself. The cruise ticket, Dorian went on, was not a vacation. It was a removal. Once you were out of the country, asset transfers would trigger automatically. If something happened to you abroad, the trust structure would make it almost impossible to recover. Something happened. Such a small phrase for erasure. Maeve sat on the floor coloring, unaware that her grandmother's life had been reduced to a clause. Lydia watched her daughter with an expression that was no longer fogged by sedation, but sharpened by rage. He told me you were confused, Lydia said quietly, that you were lonely, that you needed rest. Predators always rebrand resistance as illness, Avery replied. Lydia swallowed. I signed documents. We know, Avery said gently. That doesn't mean they stand. Lydia lifted her chin. I want him to think they do. That was the moment my daughter came back to me. Avery nodded once. Then we build a trap. The plan was simple only on the surface. Lydia would appear apologetic, fragile, grateful for Calder's guidance. I would retreat into my familiar role, the anxious mother-in-law who worried too much and trusted too easily. Calder would relax. Men like him always did when women lowered their voices. Behind the scenes, Avery filed emergency elder protection restrictions under judicial seal. Dorian traced shell accounts tied to a dead trust Calder had been laundering money through. Each step was quiet, invisible, lethal. That evening, Calder called. My love, he said warmly, how are you feeling? Lydia's voice trembled just enough, embarrassed. Mom's making a fuss again. I watched Calder's reflection appear in Lydia's eyes. Satisfaction, reassurance, control. Good, he said. Everything will be fine. He believed that, and belief, when misplaced, becomes a weakness. Calder arrived home that night believing the narrative had stabilized. Lydia was subdued. I was quiet. The chaos, as far as he could tell, had been contained. Men like Calder mistook silence for surrender because they had never learned the difference. Lydia told me later that he kissed her forehead the way one checks a lock, brief, possessive, satisfied. I spoke to your mother, he said casually, hanging his jacket. She worries too much. Lydia nodded, eyes lowered. I know. He smiled. That smile had once fooled me too. What Calder didn't know was that every conversation after that point was being preserved. Avery had arranged it carefully, within legal boundaries, with Lydia's full consent. The recordings captured tone more than words. Control has a sound. It flattens the air around it. You took your medication? Calder asked. Yes, Lydia replied. And you rested? Yes. He exhaled, pleased. Good. You're better when you follow instructions." Those words would later play in a courtroom so quiet the judge leaned forward. The next day, Avery received confirmation that the dead trust had been flagged. Eleanor Rowe's name, Calder's mother, appeared repeatedly in transactions dated months after her death. The system Calder relied on to remain invisible had begun to glow. Dorian visited the notary office connected to the shell accounts. He didn't threaten, he didn't accuse. He asked questions slowly, like a man who already knew the answers. By the time he left, the notary had retained counsel and surrendered records voluntarily. That afternoon, Calder made his mistake. He called me. "Maribel," he said warmly, "I've been thinking about you." I let a tremor into my voice. "That's kind. You've done so much for Lydia," he continued. "You deserve something special, a break." "A break?" I asked. "Yes," he said. "A cruise. Just for you, a chance to rest. We can handle things here." There it was again, the removal disguised as care. I smiled into the phone. He could hear it. "You always think of others first, Calder." He laughed softly. "Someone has to." After we hung up, Avery looked at me across the table. "He's accelerating." "Because he senses resistance," I replied. "But he doesn't know where it's coming from." "Then we end this soon," she said. The public exposure was already scheduled. Sunday's charity renewal meeting would be perfect. Calder loved audiences. He trusted them. He believed his reputation would shield him. What he didn't understand was that reputation is only protection until evidence walks into the room. Lydia practiced her part that evening. She did not rehearse words. She rehearsed posture, shoulders back, voice steady, eyes forward. She was learning how to occupy space again. I watched my daughter reclaim herself inch by inch. For the first time since Maeve's call, I allowed myself a private thought. Calder Rowe was not prepared for women who stopped apologizing. Sunday morning arrived dressed in forgiveness. The sky was pale, undecided, as if even the weather was waiting to see who would speak first. I dressed slowly. Choosing a coat, Elliot once said, made me look unmovable. Lydia wore a simple dress, nothing that invited comment. Maeve held my hand, her grip firm in a way that told me she understood more than anyone wanted her to. The church hall filled gradually, familiar faces, polite smiles, the quiet rustle of programs. Calder arrived last, as he preferred, confident that an entrance mattered more than punctuality. He kissed Lydia's cheek with practiced affection and nodded to me like a man acknowledging a predictable obstacle. "Good to see you, Maribel," he said. "You look rested." "Appearances can be comforting," I replied. He smiled, missing the edge. Avery sat 3 rows back, indistinguishable from any other attendee. Dorian stood near the side door, hands folded, eyes scanning exits. 2 officers lingered where shadows naturally gathered. Nothing announced itself. That was the point. The pastor welcomed everyone and spoke about stewardship, about caring for what we are given. Calder listened with an expression of agreement that would have been admirable if it were not rehearsed. When it was time for the charity presentation, Calder stood. He smoothed his jacket and stepped forward, a man certain of applause. "Community," he began, voice warm, "is built on trust." Avery stood. "Before we proceed," she said calmly, "there is a matter that must be addressed." The projector flickered to life. Documents appeared, clean, clear, enlarged. Calder's head turned sharply. The first sign of panic crossed his face like a shadow he couldn't control. Avery's voice did not rise. "These records show forged signatures, unauthorized medical authority transfers, and financial exploitation tied to the Rowe estate." Murmurs rippled through the room. Calder laughed once, sharply. "This is absurd." The screen changed. Video played. Calder's own voice filled the hall. Calm, directive, correcting Lydia's words, coaching her tone, teaching her how to sound unreliable. Silence fell so completely I could hear someone's breath catch. Lydia stood. Her voice did not shake. I was medicated without proper oversight, she said. I was recorded without consent. I was told my mother was dangerous because she asked questions. Calder stepped toward her. Sit down. Dorian moved forward. Don't. The officers revealed themselves then, not dramatically, but decisively. Calder's confidence collapsed inward. His mouth opened, closed. He searched the room for allies and found only witnesses. That moment, when the narrative died in public, was the first true climax, not because he was exposed, but because he was finally unheard. As he was escorted out, Maeve leaned close to me and whispered, "He doesn't look big anymore." She was right. He never had been. Arrests are quieter than people imagine. There was no shouting, no cinematic struggle, just the sound of metal cuffs closing and the scrape of a chair as Calder Row was guided toward the aisle he had once walked with confidence. Reputation does not scream when it dies. It exhales. The room remained still long after he was gone. No one rushed to fill the silence. They were all recalibrating, rewriting the version of him they had carried for years. Avery gathered her papers methodically as if this were simply the end of a meeting that had run its course. Outside, the air felt colder. Lydia drew a full breath, the kind that lifts the shoulders and steadies the spine. I realized I had not seen her stand that way since before her marriage. "It's done," she said, though her tone suggested she knew better. "It started," Avery corrected. The legal aftermath moved quickly once daylight reached it. Reed Holloway and Benson Locke were detained by evening, their shell accounts already frozen. The dead trust Calder had hidden behind became the sharpest blade against him. Federal charges do not care how charming a man once was. Weeks passed in measured steps. Lydia testified first, then rested her hand on Maeve's back as if anchoring herself to the present. She did not cry on the stand. She did not need to. Her clarity was heavier than tears. When the judge spoke, the language was precise. Fraud. Coercive control. Exploitation. Each word sealed another door Calder would never reopen. The second climax arrived without fanfare. Sentencing. Calder Row was not offered leniency for good behavior or polished manners. He was catalogued, documented, and confined. His future collapsed into dates and numbers that no longer bent to his will. Afterward, life did something unexpected. It softened. Lydia moved into a small house near mine. Maeve learned the names of the birds that visited the maple tree outside my kitchen window. We planted tomatoes and argued gently about where the sunlight was best. One evening, Lydia asked, "Did you always know he was dangerous?" I considered the question carefully. I knew something was wrong, I said. Knowing evil requires evidence. Trusting your instinct requires courage. She nodded. I won't confuse control with love again. Neither would I. Here is the truth I earned too late, but not too late to matter. People who silence you will always call you emotional. People who rewrite your memory will always claim it is for your safety. And predators depend on your politeness far more than your fear. Pay attention to discomfort. It is information. Silence is not peace. And love does not require permission to breathe. Recovery does not announce itself. It arrives quietly, like a room slowly filling with air after a long winter. In the weeks following the sentencing, Lydia moved through her days with cautious intention, as if testing the weight of her own decisions. She made lists again, not the rigid schedules Calder favored, but loose reminders written in pencil. Buy bread. Call Mom. Sit outside. Maeve returned to school with a backpack that seemed too large for her small shoulders. The teacher called to say she had begun raising her hand again, that she corrected another child gently when he got a fact wrong. I smiled at that. Children who have been silenced learn quickly how precious voice can be. I met Avery for coffee one morning at a place that served cups too large and opinions freely. She looked tired in the way people do after winning something expensive. You did well, she said. We did, I corrected. She nodded. The syndicate is unraveling. Other cases are surfacing. Your courage made it easier for others to speak. Courage. I had never thought of myself as brave, only attentive. Dorian stopped by later that week. He handed me a thin envelope. Inside was a summary of asset recovery, funds returned, properties secured, accounts restored. Numbers are supposed to comfort. They didn't. What comforted me was the absence of Calder's influence, the way the house felt larger without him in it. One afternoon, I found Lydia standing in my kitchen, staring at the window. "He used to tell me you were trying to control me," she said suddenly. I dried my hands. "And now I see you were trying to protect me," she replied, and I didn't listen. I took her face gently in my hands. Listening is a skill we learn when it's safe. She leaned into me, and for a moment she was a child again. Humor returned slowly. It arrived in small, unexpected places. Lydia laughed when the tomatoes grew crooked. Maeve declared one of them the boss tomato and insisted it supervise the rest. Even I laughed when I found an old voicemail from Calder, still saved on my phone, and deleted it without ceremony. Power loses its grip when it is no longer feared. At night, when the house was quiet, I thought about how close everything had come to ending differently. A cruise ticket, a forged signature, a plan executed with patience. Evil had almost succeeded, not because it was loud, but because it was reasonable. I wrote letters then, to friends, to my church, to women I knew only vaguely. I did not accuse. I did not dramatize. I described patterns. If someone tells you that you are confused, ask who benefits. If someone manages your voice, ask why. If someone urges rest when you are asking questions, do not sleep. These letters mattered. I received replies weeks later. Stories, thanks, confessions. Attention, I learned, is contagious. Time did not erase what happened. It reorganized it. The memories lost their sharp edges and took on shape, like glass worn smooth by water. Lydia no longer startled at sudden sounds. Maeve slept through the night. I stopped checking the locks twice. One afternoon, Lydia brought out a box she had kept hidden at the back of her closet. Inside were notebooks Calder had mocked, half-written entries, dates circled, questions she never asked aloud. "I thought these proved I was unstable," she said. "Now I see they were proof I was paying attention." We read them together. There was no rush. Some pages made us angry. Others made us laugh softly at how close she had come to the truth long before evidence arrived. Maeve joined us with crayons and added her own drawings between the pages, houses with open doors, suns too large for the paper. No one stopped her. The town shifted subtly after the trial. People who once praised Calder avoided eye contact. Others came forward with small confessions. He had asked questions, offered help, suggested arrangements. The same pattern scaled. One woman whispered to me in the grocery store aisle, "I thought I was imagining it." "You weren't," I told her. "You were early." Humor, when it returned fully, came sharper. Lydia joked that if she ever dated again, she'd demand paperwork transparency by the third date. Maeve announced she would never marry anyone who disliked her grandmother. I told her that was an excellent policy. I planted roses that spring, red ones, not delicate varieties, but sturdy bushes that required pruning. Elliot used to say roses taught patience through pain. I believed him now more than ever. One evening, Lydia asked me something I hadn't expected. "Do you regret paying for my wedding?" she asked. I considered the question carefully. "No," I said. "I regret the man you married, not the love you believed in." She nodded slowly, accepting that distinction. Justice did not make us triumphant. It made us grounded. The difference mattered. Triumph seeks applause. Grounding seeks balance. Avery sent a final message before closing the case file. "You trusted your instincts when it mattered? That's rarer than evidence." I saved it. On quiet nights, I thought about the version of myself Calder had planned for. The confused older woman boarding a cruise alone, documents already speaking on her behalf. That woman existed only on paper now. In reality, I was still here, still attentive, still capable of ending things that threatened my family. And that, I realized, was the revenge that lasted. The months that followed taught me something I had never learned in youth. Endings are not events, they are practices. We practice living without permission. We practiced asking questions out loud. We practiced letting quiet exist without filling it with apologies. Lydia returned to work on a reduced schedule. The hospital assigned her a supervisor who spoke to her as a colleague, not a problem to manage. On her first day back, she texted me a simple message. I chose my shift. I read it twice and smiled. Maeve grew taller. She measured herself against the kitchen wall with a pencil and insisted we date every mark. So we don't forget, she said. Children who have watched adults rewrite reality understand the value of records. One afternoon, a woman named Clara Whitcomb knocked on my door. I recognized her vaguely from church. She held a folder tight against her chest. I heard what you did, she said, not meeting my eyes. I think my brother-in-law is doing the same thing. I invited her in. We sat at the table where Lydia once studied late into the night. I did not promise solutions, I listened. Listening is often the first rescue. Stories came like that after, quietly, without spectacle. They did not want revenge. They wanted language for what they felt, names for patterns that had made them doubt themselves. I gave them what I could, attention, referrals, warnings about charm disguised as care. Avery's name traveled. Dorian's work multiplied. The system Calder depended on began collapsing under the weight of visibility. Lydia asked once if this made us activists. No, I said. It makes us witnesses. Witnesses are harder to silence. There were still days when anger flared unexpectedly, at the grocery store, in a parking lot, when a man spoke over a woman without noticing he had done it. Anger is not failure. It is memory demanding acknowledgement. I learned to let it pass without swallowing it. One evening, Lydia and I sat on the porch watching Maeve chase fireflies. The light blinked on and off in her hands, temporary and bright. "He told me you were afraid of being alone," Lydia said suddenly. I considered the truth. I was, I admitted, but not enough to disappear. She nodded, understanding the difference. The world did not become safer after Calder was removed, but our corner of it became clearer. We trusted discomfort. We questioned kindness that asked for silence in return. We valued clarity over calm. When people ask me now how I knew something was wrong, I answer honestly. I paid attention to how small my daughter was becoming. That answer is enough. In the end, there was no parade, no grand celebration. Justice rarely throws parties. It closes doors quietly and lets life walk forward on its own legs. The house settled into a new rhythm. Mornings came without tension. Evenings stretched instead of tightening. Lydia cooked again, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Maeve learned how to ride her bicycle in the driveway, wobbling at first, then pedaling forward with a shout that echoed down the street. I stood on the porch and watched her go, thinking how close she had come to growing up inside someone else's silence. One afternoon, I found Lydia sorting old documents into 3 piles: keep, shred, burn. She held up a paper and laughed softly. "He wrote notes in the margins," she said, telling me what to think. I took the page, fed it into the shredder, and listened until the sound stopped. "He doesn't get a voice anymore," I said. That mattered more than punishment. The town eventually found something else to talk about. Scandals age quickly when they stop producing shock, but every so often a woman would catch my eye at church or the market and nod slightly. Not gratitude, recognition. We had learned the same language. On the anniversary of Elliot's death, I visited the cemetery alone. I told him what happened, not the details, but the shape of it. How danger wore a smile, how our daughter survived, how our granddaughter still laughed easily. "I paid attention," I said aloud, "like you taught me." The wind moved through the trees. and for once the quiet did not feel heavy. Here is what I know now and what I wish someone had told me sooner. Evil does not begin with violence. It begins with permission. Permission to manage you. Permission to soften your voice. Permission to rewrite your memory for your own good. Do not grant that permission lightly. Love does not require shrinking. Care does not demand silence. And any peace that costs your clarity is not peace at all. I am still here. My daughter is still here. My granddaughter is learning what safety feels like. That is not luck. That is attention, applied in time. And if you are listening to this story and something inside you feels uncomfortably familiar, do not ignore it. Discomfort is often the first draft of truth. Tell me in the comments, have you ever ignored a warning because it came from someone you loved, and what did it cost you? Subscribe for more stories of justice. Thank you so much for listening. See you in our next story.